I am Tracy Adams, 35 years old, with a corner office at a marketing firm, and what I thought was a perfect 8-year marriage to James. The diamond bracelet was his gift on our 5th anniversary, containing stones from my grandmother's ring. I never imagined seeing it on another woman's wrist during dinner at my husband's boss's house. While my heart shattered, my face remained calm. If you're wondering how I responded to such betrayal, stay with me. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from, hit that subscribe button, and give this video a like if you've ever had to stay composed when everything inside you was falling apart. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, where my parents taught me the value of hard work and integrity. Mum was a high school teacher and Dad managed a local hardware store. They weren't wealthy, but they provided a loving home filled with books and encouragement. When I earned a scholarship to study marketing at Northwestern, they couldn't have been prouder. College was challenging but rewarding. I graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at Walker & Associates in Chicago. I worked long hours, took on extra projects, and slowly climbed the corporate ladder. By 30, I was leading my own team and had a reputation for creativity and determination. I met James Carter at a charity gala benefiting children's literacy. I was 25 and had been asked to represent my company. James, 28 at the time, worked for Hamilton Financial Group, an elite investment firm. He approached me at the bar with a charming smile and an insightful comment about the keynote speaker. That speech really hit home, he said. My mother was a librarian who believed books could change lives. We talked for hours that night, discovering shared values and ambitions. James was handsome, with dark hair and intense blue eyes, but it was his passion and drive that attracted me most. He had grown up in a wealthy Connecticut family, but seemed determined to make his own way rather than coast on family connections. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, we were inseparable, and after a year, he proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. The wedding was elegant, but not extravagant. 200 guests at a historic Chicago hotel with a string quartet and garden roses everywhere. Early married life felt like a partnership of equals. We moved into a luxury condo with panoramic views of the city. I continued advancing at my firm while James received promotion after promotion. We traveled extensively, Paris, Tokyo, Barcelona, and discussed starting a family someday when our careers were more established. My sister Amanda lived nearby with her husband and 2 children. She was 3 years younger, but often seemed wiser, especially about relationships. You two are always working, she would observe during our monthly lunch dates. Make sure you're building a life together, not just parallel careers. My best friend Natalie had known me since college and worked at First National Bank. She was more direct. Your husband is gorgeous and successful. Make time for him, or someone else might. I laughed off such comments. James and I were solid, I thought. Yes, we were busy, but we were building a future together. When James's firm opened a new office in Boston 5 years into our marriage, we relocated. We purchased a beautiful colonial home in Brookline with 4 bedrooms and a landscaped yard. I transferred to my company's Boston branch and quickly established myself as a valuable team member. James's career accelerated further. He became the youngest partner at Hamilton Financial, managing portfolios for high net worth individuals. His success meant longer hours and frequent business trips to New York, Chicago, and occasionally overseas. For our 5th anniversary, he surprised me with a weekend at the Four Seasons and a custom diamond bracelet. The jeweler had incorporated 3 diamonds from my grandmother's ring, a family heirloom my mother had given me before she passed away 2 years earlier. These diamonds represent your past, James said as he clasped it around my wrist. The new setting represents our future together. I cherished that bracelet not for its monetary value, which was considerable, but for what it symbolized: family legacy and marital commitment intertwined. After 6 years together, I began noticing subtle changes in James. He started bringing work home more frequently, yet seemed less inclined to discuss it. His phone became a constant companion, and he would step into another room to take calls. When I asked questions about his day, his answers grew vague. "Just the usual client headaches," he would say, brushing off my inquiries. Business trips became more frequent, weekend conferences, unexpected client emergencies in other cities. I focused on my own career challenges, dismissing the small voice of concern in the back of my mind. After all, we still shared meals when our schedules aligned. He still brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. We still made love, though less frequently. These were just the natural ebbs and flows of a mature relationship, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. I had no idea how wrong I was. The first real suspicion came during tax season 8 months ago. I was organising our financial documents when I found receipts from restaurants in Boston on evenings James was supposedly in New York. There was a hotel charge in Providence when he had told me he was at a conference in Philadelphia. When I casually mentioned these discrepancies, his reaction surprised me. "Are you checking up on me now?" he snapped, then quickly softened. "Sorry that came out wrong. The Philadelphia conference was moved last minute, and those Boston receipts must be from other trips. You know how these expenses get mixed up." His explanation sounded reasonable, but his initial defensiveness lingered in my mind. A few weeks later, we attended a dinner with several of James's colleagues. Martin, slightly drunk on expensive Cabernet, mentioned seeing James at Sorrelina. "That new client must be important," Martin laughed. 3 dinner meetings in 1 month. I kept my expression neutral, even as confusion swept through me. James had never mentioned these dinners, and on one of those evenings, he had told me he was working late at the office. James smoothly changed the subject, but later claimed Martin had confused him with another colleague. "You know how Martin gets after a few drinks," he said. "Besides, I'd never go to Sorrelina without you. It's your favourite." I tried to believe him, but doubt had taken root. Amanda suggested I might be overreacting when I shared my concerns during our sister lunch. "Everyone gets a little secretive when planning anniversary surprises," she said. "Your 7th is coming up, right? Maybe that's all this is." I wanted to believe her explanation, but other incidents kept accumulating. A text notification appearing on James's phone while he was in the shower. "Miss you already. S." He claimed it was from his colleague Samuel about a project they'd just completed. I considered confronting him directly, but hesitated without concrete evidence. What if I was misreading signals? What if work stress was making me paranoid? I didn't want to accuse my husband without certainty. Then came the cancelled business trip. James had packed for 3 days in Chicago, kissed me goodbye, and left for the airport. That evening, I received a text saying his meetings had been postponed, but he had decided to take a couple of personal days to clear his head at a resort in Vermont. "Just need some space to think about the Wilson portfolio. Reception is spotty, so don't worry if I'm hard to reach." It seemed odd, but not implausible. Investment banking was stressful, and James had been working 60-hour weeks. 2 days later, I decided to surprise James with lunch at his office. The receptionist looked confused. "James took a few personal days," she said. "I thought you knew." "Of course," I replied smoothly. "I just forgot which day he was returning." That evening, I carefully examined his suits and detected an unfamiliar perfume on his jacket floral with notes of jasmine, definitely not mine. My stomach knotted as pieces started fitting together in an unwelcome pattern. I decided to call Natalie, who had remained my confidant after our move to Boston. "You need to find out for sure," she said after listening to my concerns. "I know someone discreet, a private investigator my bank has used for financial fraud cases. Want his number?" I hesitated, feeling like I was crossing a line. Hiring an investigator seemed extreme, melodramatic even. "If James is innocent, you'll get peace of mind," Natalie pointed out. "If not, you'll have facts to make informed decisions." After another week of suspicious phone calls and unexplained absences, I made the call. The private investigator, Daniel Morgan, was professional and matter-of-fact. He took detailed notes during our discreet meeting at a coffee shop far from my home or office. "I'll need a week for initial surveillance," he explained. "I'll focus on documenting your husband's activities when he's supposedly working late or traveling." 7 days later, Daniel sent me a text. "Information to share. Same location at 3 p.m. I arrived early, heart pounding. Daniel passed me a manila envelope without preamble. "There's a pattern," he said gently. "Same woman, multiple locations." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photos of James entering a luxury apartment building in Back Bay, a boutique hotel near Beacon Hill, and an upscale restaurant in the North End. In each image, he was accompanied by the same woman, tall, slender, with long, dark hair. Late 20s, I guessed, stylishly dressed in designer clothes. "Her name is Sofia Rodriguez," Daniel explained. 27 years old, interior designer with a growing reputation among Boston's elite. She worked on the renovations at Hamilton Financial's offices about 6 months ago. 6 months. Around the time James's behavior began changing, I sat in my car afterward, photos spread across my lap, and finally allowed myself to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. I had suspected yes, but knowing was different. A physical pain like being hollowed out from the inside. That evening, I searched for Sophia on social media and found her professional profile. Her portfolio showcased luxurious homes and offices with testimonials from wealthy clients. Her personal Instagram featured exotic vacations, gallery openings, and elegant restaurant meals. A carefully curated display of sophisticated living. I waited until the weekend to confront James, using the time to gather my thoughts and control my emotions. "I need to ask you something," I said as we had coffee on Saturday morning. "Who is Sofia Rodriguez?" His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. A flicker of panic crossed his face before he composed himself. "A designer who worked on our office renovation. Why? And that's all she is to you, a designer. What are you getting at, Tracy?" His tone was somewhere between confused and annoyed. I placed Daniel's photos on the kitchen counter. "I know you've been meeting her for months. I know about the apartment in Back Bay." James stared at the evidence, then attempted denial. "This isn't what it looks like. Sophia is helping me plan a surprise renovation for our house, for our anniversary." The lie was so transparent, I almost laughed. "Please don't insult my intelligence." After more weak denials, James finally admitted to a friendship that became complicated. "It's not serious," he insisted. "Just a distraction. Work has been so stressful, and you've been so busy with your own career." I listened to his rationalizations with growing coldness. He wasn't confessing out of honesty, but because he'd been caught, and he wasn't even admitting to the full extent of the relationship. "I need time to process this," I said, finally cutting off his explanations. "I'm going to stay with Amanda this weekend." Surprisingly, I felt calm as I packed an overnight bag. The initial shock had crystallized into something harder, more focused. At my sister's house, I decided not to tell her everything yet. I needed to gather more information before making any decisions. I instructed Daniel to continue his investigation, focusing now on financial connections between James and Sophia. Were they just meeting, or was there more? Meanwhile, I pretended to accept James's partial confession and apologies when I returned home. "I'll end it," he promised. "It was a mistake. You're what matters to me." I nodded as if I believed him, while privately noting he spoke of ending something he had claimed was just a friendship. Over the next few weeks, Daniel documented James visiting Sophia despite his promises to me. He also uncovered evidence of expensive gifts, designer handbags, jewelry, weekend trips to New York. Then came the discovery that truly stunned me. While looking for a pair of earrings in our bedroom safe, I realized my diamond bracelet was missing. James had always known the combination we kept our most valuable items there together. When questioned, he claimed he'd taken it to the jeweler for cleaning as a surprise. "I noticed the clasp seemed loose," he explained. "I called our usual jeweler the next day. They had no record of receiving my bracelet." James had lied again, and I had a sickening suspicion about where my bracelet might be. The betrayal felt doubled now, not just the affair, but the theft of something so personally meaningful. The bracelet wasn't just expensive, it contained my family history memories of my grandmother and mother. That James would take it presumably to give to his mistress revealed a callousness I hadn't realized he possessed. I shared everything with Amanda and Natalie, now needing their support and advice. Document everything, Amanda advised. Her husband was an attorney. If he's taking your personal property, what else might he be doing? Natalie was more direct. You need a plan, Tracy. Not just for your marriage, but to protect yourself. They were right. This wasn't just about emotional betrayal anymore. It was about self-preservation. I needed to be strategic rather than reactive. The time for tears had passed. Now I needed clarity and purpose. The Kendalls are hosting a dinner party Saturday night, James announced one evening in early October. Richard specifically asked if you'd be there. Richard Kendall was James's boss and a founding partner at Hamilton Financial. His social invitations were essentially professional obligations. Of course I'll attend, I replied, watching James's relief. I spent hours preparing for that dinner, selecting a midnight blue dress that conveyed elegant confidence. I styled my hair in a sleek updo, applied makeup that enhanced without overwhelming, and wore simple pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. The Kendalls' home was a Georgian mansion in Chestnut Hill, with immaculate gardens and a 3-car garage housing vintage automobiles. Richard's wife, Margaret, greeted us warmly, taking my coat and complimenting my dress. Everyone's gathering in the living room for cocktails, she explained, leading us through their marble-floored foyer. The room was filled with familiar faces, partners from the firm, their spouses, a few clients I'd met at previous events. James immediately gravitated toward a group discussing market forecasts, while I accepted a glass of champagne from a circulating server. I was making polite conversation with the wife of another partner when she entered. Sophia Rodriguez, even more striking in person than in photographs, on the arm of Martin Wilson, the colleague who had mentioned seeing James at Sorrelina. James's face drained of colour when he spotted her, a reaction not lost on me or I suspected others in the room. I maintained my composure as I observed them. Sophia wore a form-fitting red dress that showcased her figure perfectly. Her hair fell in glossy waves past her shoulders. She laughed at something Martin said, her hand resting casually on his arm. Then I saw it. On her right wrist, my diamond bracelet. The unique setting was unmistakable, 3 larger diamonds surrounded by smaller stones in a vintage-inspired pattern. Our eyes met across the room. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, followed by something else, not embarrassment, but a subtle smugness. She knew exactly who I was. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a deliberate power play. James had noticed our visual exchange and was now making his way toward me, panic evident in his hurried movements. "Tracy," he said, under his breath, gripping my elbow, "let's step outside for a minute." "I'm having a lovely conversation with Diane," I replied, smiling at my companion. "I wouldn't want to be rude." Margaret announced dinner before James could insist. We proceeded to the dining room, where place cards arranged guests at a long mahogany table. By some cruel coincidence, or perhaps Margaret's innocent attempt to seat people with new conversational partners, I found myself directly across from Sophia, with James 3 seats away. Throughout the first course, a butternut squash soup, I felt Sophia's occasional glance. She seemed to be gauging my reaction, perhaps waiting for an emotional outburst. The bracelet caught the light whenever she reached for her wine glass. "Beautiful bracelet," remarked the woman beside Sophia. "It looks vintage." "A recent gift," Sophia replied, her eyes briefly meeting mine. "From someone very special." James became intensely interested in his soup. I excused myself after the main course was served, needing a moment alone. In the powder room, I stared at my reflection, composed on the outside, while rage and hurt churned within. I could leave now, create a scene, confront them both publicly. Part of me wanted that release. Instead, I reapplied my lipstick, took a deep breath, and returned to the table. This wasn't the time or place for confrontation. Something told me to wait, to watch, to plan. James intercepted me in the hallway. "Tracy, please," he whispered urgently. "Don't make a scene. I can explain everything." "Can you explain why your interior designer is wearing my grandmother's diamonds?" I asked quietly. "I'll get the bracelet back. I swear." She took it without my knowledge. Another lie. I could see it in his eyes. "We will discuss this at home," I said with finality. "Right now, we're going to return to dinner and behave like the adults we supposedly are." For the remainder of the evening, I observed Sophia's interactions. She wasn't just flirting with Martin, she touched James's arm when passing him, whispered comments that made him tense up, positioned herself near him during after-dinner drinks. Her behaviour suggested not just a casual affair, but a woman who felt entitled to display her conquest. Richard Kendall wasn't oblivious. I caught him watching these interactions with a thoughtful expression. His wife Margaret, too, seemed to be taking mental notes. As we prepared to leave, Richard pulled me aside. "Tracy, it's always good to see you. Perhaps we could have lunch next week. There are some charity initiatives I'd like your professional opinion on." His tone was casual, but his eyes conveyed something more serious. I agreed to lunch, wondering what he really wanted to discuss. On the drive home, James alternated between apologising and making excuses. Sophia had misunderstood the nature of their relationship. The bracelet was a temporary loan. He would end things immediately. I listened in silence, already knowing I couldn't trust anything he said. The diamond bracelet was just a symbol of a much deeper betrayal. James hadn't just cheated, he had given away something precious that connected me to my family heritage. That night, as James slept fitfully beside me, I made a decision. I wouldn't act rashly from emotion. I would respond strategically, with dignity and purpose. This wasn't just about saving my pride, it was about justice and self-respect. The woman who had entered that dinner party was not the same one who left it. Something had hardened in me, not into bitterness, but into resolve. I would turn this humiliation into strength, this betrayal into freedom, and I would do it calmly, methodically, and completely. The Monday after the Kendall dinner, I contacted a divorce attorney. Melissa Bennett came highly recommended for handling high net worth separations with discretion and thoroughness. "Document everything," she advised during our initial consultation. "Financial records, communication, evidence of the affair. Massachusetts isn't a pure no-fault state. Misconduct can influence property division." She explained that James's infidelity alone might not significantly impact our financial settlement, but if he had used marital assets to support the affair, that could be considered dissipation of marital property. "The bracelet," I said. "It was a gift to me containing family heirlooms." Melissa nodded. "That's personal property with sentimental value beyond its monetary worth. We'll include it specifically in our demands." She also recommended I gather comprehensive financial information before James realised I was contemplating divorce. Spouses sometimes begin hiding assets once they know separation is imminent. That evening, after James mentioned a late client meeting, I used his computer password, our wedding date. Painfully ironic to access his email. What I found shocked me beyond the affair. Messages between James and offshore accounts, discussions with unfamiliar names about investments not listed in our financial disclosures, references to special client arrangements that sounded suspicious even to my untrained ear. I forwarded selected emails to my personal account, then carefully restored his inbox to its original state. The next day, I met Richard Kendall for our scheduled lunch. After brief pleasantries, he addressed what was clearly on both our minds. "Tracy, I've known you for years as an intelligent, gracious woman," he began. "What happened at my dinner party was unfortunate. I want you to know that Hamilton Financial doesn't condone unprofessional relationships between staff and service providers. I appreciated his discretion in not naming names. Thank you, Richard. I value your friendship and James's career with your firm. There's something else, he continued, lowering his voice. The compliance team has flagged some irregularities in accounts James manages, nothing definitively problematic yet, but enough to warrant a closer look. His words confirmed my suspicions from James's emails. This went beyond personal betrayal into potential professional misconduct. I'd appreciate your discretion on this matter, Richard added, both aspects of it. I assured him of my confidentiality, though my mind was racing with implications. Back at my office, I received a text from an unknown number. We should talk. Coffee tomorrow. Sophia Rodriguez. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity prevailed. I agreed to meet at a cafe in Cambridge, far from our usual circles. Sophia arrived looking less polished than at the dinner party, but still striking in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. My bracelet was noticeably absent from her wrist. I know what you must think of me, she began, without preamble. I doubt that, I replied evenly. James told me he was separated when we met, she continued. Said his marriage was over in everything but paper. By the time I realized that wasn't true, I was already invested. Emotionally or financially, I asked. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. Both. James has been generous, very generous. The bracelet, I didn't know its history when he gave it to me. He claimed it was new. Yet you wore it to a dinner where you knew I would be present. She didn't deny it. I wanted you to know. Maybe that was wrong, but I thought you deserved to see who he really is. Why are you telling me this now? Because he's doing the same thing to me that he probably did to you, she admitted. I've seen text messages from other women, found receipts for gifts I never received. History repeats itself, right? I recorded our entire conversation discreetly using my phone, with Massachusetts being a two-party consent state. Her knowledge of being in a public place constituted implied consent according to my attorney. Meanwhile, I cultivated a connection with James's assistant, Linda, taking her to lunch under the guise of planning James's upcoming birthday. Linda had worked with him for 3 years and managed much of his administrative work. I've been concerned about James, I confided after establishing rapport. He seems stressed about certain clients. Linda hesitated before responding. There have been some unusual transactions. Nothing I could specifically point to, but she explained that James had created separate filing systems for certain clients, handled their correspondence personally rather than through normal channels, and had meetings that never appeared on his official calendar. I assumed it was just for high-privacy clients, she said, but recently compliance has been asking questions. This aligned with what Richard had mentioned and the emails I'd discovered. James wasn't just cheating on me, he appeared to be engaging in questionable financial practices. I shared my findings with Natalie, asking her professional opinion as a bank executive. These patterns are red flags, she confirmed after reviewing the information. Without seeing the actual accounts, I can't say definitively, but it resembles structures used for hiding assets or possibly money laundering. She recommended a forensic accountant who specialized in financial investigations. If James is doing what I suspect, you need professional help documenting it, both for your divorce and potentially for legal protection. The forensic accountant, Eleanor Wright, was thorough and dispassionate. She examined our tax returns, investment statements, property records, and the emails I'd forwarded. Your husband has been moving money through a complex network of accounts, she concluded after 2 weeks of investigation. Some transactions appear to be legitimate tax minimization strategies, but others suggest funds being diverted away from both marital assets and possibly client accounts. She estimated that James had potentially hidden over $300,000 in the past year alone. More concerning were indications he might be misusing client funds, a much more serious offense with potential criminal implications. You need to protect yourself, Eleanor advised. Establish separate accounts, secure your personal assets, and prepare for financial independence. If these activities come to light, officially, there could be significant repercussions for both his career and your joint finances. Following her advice, I opened new bank accounts at an institution where James had no connections. I transferred my personal inheritance from my mother into these accounts funds that had remained separate from our marital assets and were legally mine alone. I updated my will and insurance beneficiaries. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade of normalcy at home. James and I still shared meals, discussed mundane household matters, and occasionally attended social functions together. If he noticed my emotional withdrawal, he attributed it to lingering hurt over the bracelet incident, which he continued to minimize. "I've ended things with Sophia," he assured me repeatedly. "The bracelet was a stupid mistake. I'll get it back." I smiled and nodded, neither believing nor confronting. My silence seemed to unnerve him more than arguments would have. He began bringing home flowers, suggesting weekend getaways, making dinner reservations at my favourite restaurants, attempts at reconciliation that felt hollow against the backdrop of what I now knew. The final piece fell into place when I encountered Sophia again, this time genuinely by accident, at a small art gallery in Southend. She approached me looking nervous. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said. "There's something else you should know." She revealed that James had promised to leave me and marry her once a big deal came through. He had convinced her to invest substantial personal funds in what he described as an exclusive investment opportunity. "I'm starting to think it might not be legitimate," she admitted. "When I ask for documentation, he gets defensive." "Do you have any records of these investments?" I asked carefully. She did transfer confirmations emails, even a basic investment agreement he'd drafted. She agreed to forward them to me, motivated by her growing concern about financial loss. With this information, I had a complete picture. James was not just cheating with Sophia, but potentially defrauding her and others, including possibly his own clients. The bracelet that had triggered this investigation now seemed almost trivial compared to the broader deception I'd uncovered. Armed with comprehensive evidence, I was ready to act, not from emotion, but from a position of knowledge and strength. The tables were about to turn. I scheduled dinner at our home on a Friday evening, telling James I wanted to discuss rebuilding our relationship. I suggested inviting Richard and Margaret Kendall as a step towards social normalcy. "Are you sure?" James asked, clearly surprised by my apparent willingness to move forward. "I think it's important," I replied. "Richard has been a significant part of your career. Having them here signals we're working through our difficulties." James readily agreed, perhaps seeing this as a chance to repair both his marriage and any damage to his professional reputation. I prepared meticulously for this evening. Our dining room was set with fine china and crystal. I arranged for a catering service to deliver a gourmet meal, allowing me to focus on the conversation rather than cooking. Soft music played throughout the house, creating an atmosphere of refined comfort. Most importantly, I had all my evidence organised in a leather portfolio in my study, financial records emails, Sophia's documentation, and the private investigator's reports. My attorney was on standby, aware that this evening might accelerate the timeline for filing divorce papers. The Kendalls arrived at 7, Margaret, bringing an expensive bottle of wine and complimenting our home. James played the role of gracious host, seemingly relieved by my cordial demeanour. If he noticed my occasional distant expression, he didn't comment. Throughout dinner, I guided the conversation skillfully from casual topics toward business ethics. I mentioned articles about financial industry standards and regulatory compliance, watching James grow increasingly tense as the discussion progressed. After dessert was served, I excused myself briefly and returned with my portfolio. "I've been reflecting on integrity lately," I said, calmly addressing Richard more than James, "how it forms the foundation of both personal relationships and professional reputations." James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. In my reflection, I've discovered some concerning information that affects us all at this table. I turned to James. Would you like to share it, or should I? His face paled. Tracy, this isn't the time. I disagree, I interrupted gently. Richard and Margaret are family friends as well as your colleagues. They deserve transparency. I looked directly at the Kendalls. James has been having an affair with Sofia Rodriguez, the designer who worked on your office renovation. She was wearing my family diamond bracelet at your dinner party, a calculated move to establish her position. Margaret gasped softly while Richard's expression hardened. That's a personal matter, James began. It would be, I agreed, except that it extends beyond our marriage into professional territory. I placed financial documents on the table. James has been moving substantial amounts of money through obscured channels. Some appears to be diverted marital assets, but other transactions suggest client funds may be involved. Richard leaned forward, examining the papers with growing concern. There's more. I continued presenting emails and investment agreements. Sofia and potentially others have been encouraged to invest in opportunities that appear questionable at best. The documentation suggests these may be unauthorized investment vehicles. James stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Tracy is upset about personal issues and manufacturing financial concerns. Sit down, James, Richard said quietly but firmly. These documents warrant explanation. I have a recording of Sofia confirming she knew about our marriage despite James's claims of separation, I added, playing a brief clip from my phone. She also describes investments James encouraged her to make outside normal firm channels. James attempted another denial, then tried to shift blame to me. Tracy's been unstable since her mother died. She's imagining conspiracies. The compliance team has already flagged several accounts, Richard interrupted. These documents add context to patterns we've been investigating. Margaret, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. This isn't the first time, is it, Richard? She turned to me. Sofia isn't the first young woman. There was that client's daughter last year and the marketing consultant before that. Richard nodded grimly. We've had concerns about both personal and professional boundaries. This evidence suggests the issues may be more serious than we realized. James's confident facade crumbled completely. He alternated between pleading for understanding and accusing me of betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. I've invested 8 years in this marriage, I said when he finally fell silent. I deserved honesty. Your clients deserved integrity. We all deserved better than this. I removed an envelope from my portfolio and placed it before him. These are divorce papers. My attorney will expect your response through proper channels. Richard assured me he would address the professional aspects of the situation immediately. Hamilton Financial takes ethical violations extremely seriously. I appreciate your discretion in bringing this to my attention privately rather than reporting directly to regulatory authorities. As the evening concluded, I made one final request of James. I want my bracelet returned, not in a week or a month. Tonight. He claimed he didn't have it, that Sofia had kept it despite his requests. Then call her, I insisted. Now. Under Richard's stern gaze, James made the call. Within an hour, a courier delivered a small package containing my bracelet, the diamond still intact, but the setting somehow tarnished by its journey. After the Kendalls departed, promising ongoing support, James made a desperate final appeal. We can work through this, he insisted. 8 years together has to count for something. It counted for everything, I replied. That's why your betrayal mattered so much. Please be out of the house by Monday. My attorney will handle communication going forward. As he left to pack an overnight bag, I felt not victory, but a profound sense of closure. I had faced betrayal not with emotional outbursts, but with methodical clarity. I had protected myself while ensuring accountability. Most importantly, I had maintained my dignity throughout the process. The diamond bracelet lay on the table before me, a symbol transformed from betrayal back to family legacy. I would have it redesigned, I decided. Something entirely new that honoured the past while embracing an unexpected future. The aftermath unfolded gradually over the following months. James moved into a hotel initially, then a small apartment as the divorce proceedings began. Hamilton Financial placed him on administrative leave pending an internal investigation, which eventually led to his termination when the extent of his financial improprieties became clear. My attorney, Melissa, proved worth every penny of her substantial fees. She negotiated a settlement that fairly divided our legitimate assets, while protecting me from any liability for James's questionable financial activities. The house was sold with proceeds split according to our contributions. My bracelet was specifically designated as personal property to be retained by me. James faced not just professional disgrace, but potential legal consequences as regulatory authorities opened their own investigation into his handling of client funds. Sophia disappeared from his life immediately after his financial house of cards began collapsing. She had her own losses to contend with, having invested substantial personal funds in his schemes. Despite the objective success of my strategic approach, the emotional aftermath hit me harder than expected. Once the practical matters were in motion, and I moved into a temporary apartment, the grief finally emerged not in public breakdowns, but in private moments of profound sadness. I mourned not just the end of my marriage, but the death of the future I had envisioned. 8 years of shared history, inside jokes, holiday traditions, and intertwined lives, all built on a foundation that had proven false. Amanda became my lifeline during this period. Her guest room became my weekend refuge when my apartment walls closed in. Her children's innocent chatter provided welcome distraction from my circling thoughts. "You handled everything perfectly," she assured me one evening as we shared wine on her patio. "But it's okay to not be okay now. You don't have to be strong all the time." Her permission broke something open in me. I cried for hours that night, releasing months of carefully controlled emotions. It felt like lancing a wound, painful but necessary for healing to begin. Natalie provided different but equally valuable support. She connected me with a financial advisor specializing in newly single women, helping me establish investment strategies appropriate for my current situation. She also introduced me to her cycling group, Active Professional Women, who welcomed me without prying questions about my marital status. When the divorce was finalized 6 months after that pivotal dinner, I decided to take a sabbatical from work. My firm, appreciative of my consistent performance despite personal turmoil, approved a 3-month leave of absence with partial pay. I used this time to reconnect with myself, the Tracy who existed before becoming half of Tracy and James. I travelled alone to Portugal and Spain, countries we had never visited together. I walked for hours along unfamiliar coastlines, sat in cafes with books I'd long wanted to read, and gradually rediscovered simple pleasures without the shadow of betrayal. In Barcelona, I met an American art historian named Laura, who was researching Catalan architecture. We spent 3 days exploring Gaudi's buildings together, discussing creativity and resilience rather than my failed marriage. Her passion for her work reminded me of my own professional enthusiasm, something that had dimmed during recent events. "What will you do when you return home?" she asked over our final dinner together. "Rebuild," I answered simply, but differently this time. Back in Boston, I found an apartment in a neighborhood James and I had never frequented. I furnished it entirely with new pieces that reflected only my taste. I resumed therapy, working through not just the betrayal, but examining why I had missed the signs for so long. "You were committed to your vision of the relationship," my therapist observed. "That's not weakness, it's loyalty. The failure was his, not yours." Gradually, I recognized the truth in her words. I hadn't been naive or stupid. I had been trustworthy and expected the same from my partner. His inability to honour that trust reflected his character flaws, not mine. During this period of recovery, I made an unexpected connection. Through a professional women's network, I met 2 other women who had been involved with James at different points. Rather than creating animosity, our shared experience forged a unique bond. Over dinner, we compared stories and found eerily similar patterns of deception. "He told me his wife didn't understand him," said Catherine, a pharmaceutical executive. "He promised we'd travel to Greece once his divorce was finalised," added Jennifer, a curator at the Museum of Fine Arts. We laughed at the unoriginality of his approach, finding unexpected healing in this shared recognition of a pattern larger than our individual experiences. 6 weeks after my return to work, I took my grandmother's diamonds to a jewellery designer recommended by Margaret Kendall. We discussed creating something entirely new, a pendant that honoured the stone's history while giving them a fresh context. "These diamonds have quite a journey," the designer remarked as she examined them. "They're survivors," I replied. "Like me." The pendant was completed just before Christmas, a modern asymmetrical design that showcased the 3 family diamonds alongside smaller sapphires. It felt right to transform something that had been tainted by betrayal into a new symbol of resilience. I wore it to my company's holiday party, where I was announced as the new Director of Creative Strategy, a promotion I had earned through consistent performance despite personal challenges. Colleagues who knew fragments of my story offered quiet congratulations, respecting my privacy while acknowledging my professional achievement. 8 months after the divorce, I received an invitation to dinner from Michael Lawson, an architect I had met through a client project. Our professional relationship had always included easy conversation and shared intellectual interests. "Just dinner," his note specified. "No pressure, no expectations." I hesitated, unsure if I was ready. After consideration, I accepted with clear boundaries about my current emotional state. To my surprise, dinner was enjoyable, engaging conversation, genuine laughter, and no pressure for more than I could give. "I'm still rebuilding," I explained over dessert. "I don't know when or if I'll be ready for more. Rebuilding takes time," he replied. "I respect that. For now, good conversation with someone I admire is enough." His patience and understanding contrasted sharply with James's entitled expectations. We continued occasional dinners and cultural outings, developing a friendship that might or might not evolve further. The lack of pressure allowed me to rediscover trust at my own pace. 1 year after that fateful dinner party, where Sophia wore my bracelet, I attended another gathering at the Kendalls. Richard had retired from Hamilton Financial following the scandal involving James and several other executives. The firm had undergone substantial restructuring to restore client confidence. Margaret embraced me warmly at the door. "You look wonderful, Tracy. There's a light about you that was missing before." Inside, I recognized many familiar faces, including some who had witnessed my humiliation a year earlier. This time, I moved through the room with quiet confidence rather than controlled pain. When someone discreetly mentioned James's name, I replied calmly, "That chapter of my life is closed. I'm focused on writing new ones." Later that evening, Richard raised a toast to new beginnings and integrity in all aspects of life. His eyes met mine briefly across the room, an acknowledgement of my role in bringing necessary truth to light. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey from betrayal to rebuilding. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something constructive: greater self-knowledge, clearer boundaries, deeper appreciation for authentic relationships. I had learned to trust my instincts, to verify what seemed questionable, and to act decisively rather than ignore uncomfortable truths. Most importantly, I had discovered that responding to betrayal with deliberate calm rather than reactive chaos had preserved my dignity and ultimately served justice more effectively. My story wasn't one of perfect happiness restored. Life rarely offers such neat resolutions. Instead, It was about finding strength in vulnerability, wisdom through pain, and the courage to begin again with clear eyes and an open heart. The woman who entered that dinner party a year ago had been betrayed and humiliated. The woman driving home tonight had reclaimed her power by responding not with drama, but with dignified determination. Both women were me, the second, tempered and strengthened by the experiences of the first. Have you ever faced betrayal and had to decide between an emotional reaction or a strategic response? I'd love to hear how you handled your situation in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more authentic life experiences. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that maintaining dignity during difficult times is a strength, not a weakness. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes turning the tables calmly is the most powerful response of all.